Hello, dear viewers. I'm George from Ireland. I'm on Albion Street in London, in an area called Bayswater, because this lost river of London, Bayswater, is now underground. But anyway, I'm here to talk about the last Rajah of Sarawak, and that was this house just there with a blue plaque. It's an early 19th century house that's from this area, started really being built up. It's part of the city of Westminster back then, not considered part of London. Anyway, Sarawak lies on the island of Borneo in Southeast Asia, and what's now Sarawak is one of the states of Malaysia. So the people there are mostly Sunni Muslims and speak Bahasa Malaysia. But in the interior, they're people who are still animists, following other religions, speaking other indigenous languages. So James Brooke had been in the Honourable East India Company in the early 19th century, and he had become Rajah of Sarawak, despite being a Christian, founding this dynasty of the White Rajas. And I believe he died without sons, so it went to his nephew, then his great-nephew, and then his great-grandnephew, i.e. this bloke here. So he's the last of the four Rajas of Sarawak. Anyway, our man, Sir Charles Vyner Brooke, was born in Greenwich, London, in 1874. He went to Winchester College, one of the British Empire's most distinguished colleges. I can say the Empire at the time because it was at its apogee back then. And he went on to Magdalen College, Cambridge. I'm not sure why. You'd think he might have gone to somewhere of Oxford, Cambridge, one of the grander colleges. Anyhow, then he went out to Sarawak, where he worked as a civil servant there. His father was ruling His Highness. That was their title. So despite ruling over a largely Muslim people, nobody seems to have objected, and they ruled completely by royal fiat. And they, I don't think they were actually part of the British Empire as such, but still had very cordial relations therewith. Modern nationalism, as we think of it, didn't exist back then, but the country was starting to prosper through rubber plantations and so on. Oil hadn't been discovered at that stage. He wouldn't allow Christian missionaries going into the hinterland to try and convert the autochthonous people, because the Malays weren't actually indigenous to that area, even though they're the majority. They'd often come from Peninsular Malaysia. They had some Arab and Indian ancestry, and they converted to Islam several centuries earlier. People often having been Hindu in that area, certainly around the coast, something which they don't like to be reminded of. Anyway, so he inherited the crown, if memory serves, 1924, and his brother was there assisting him a lot. Then the Japanese invaded in 1941, so he promptly took all the money he could out of the treasury, £250,000. That was a very great sum at the time, and he fled to Australia, where he sat out the rest of the Second World War. The Japanese occupied the country, so he returned in 1946, but after only 2 months, he abdicated, I'm not quite sure, and ceded it to the British Empire. I don't know why he just didn't carry on reigning, but there have been the stirrings of nationalism, which the Japanese has very strongly encouraged, saying Asia for the Asiatics. We don't want, you mustn't be ruled by the British. They're exploitative and they're heathens and they don't respect your culture or faith. So perhaps he didn't want to contend with that. And there was this conflict in Peninsular Malaysia, the Malayan People's Anti-Japanese Army, often ethnically Chinese and communist, rebelling against British colonial rule. The Malays largely taking the British side, the Indians kind of split. But and then he lived out the rest of his life here. And Albion Street, curiously, obviously Albion meaning England, maybe that's very significant. He chose this, England Street, as it were, because even though he had connections to Sarawak, spent most of his life there, he was English-born, and indeed he died English as well. I met a lady who lives in the street, I shan't say where, a very elderly woman who once been a Lord Mayor of Westminster. Even if a woman is mayor, we say mayor, not mayoress. Mayoress is the wife of a mayor, and she said there was talk of her marrying him in her youth. Maybe I think his son. No, wait a second, can't be a son, must be someone else, because he was married and he had 3 daughters, unless his wife died. Or was she really going cuckoo when she said that to me? And Thackeray lived up the street, not at the same time. Thackeray has plaques at least 3 addresses in London. I think the blue plaque scheme limits people to 3, and just there is Hyde Park. Okay, the River Bayswater runs under here and into Hyde Park, as well as Tyburn, another one of the lost rivers of London. Okay, I'll switch it off now. Toodle pip.